When I first started my company, I had to fire 8 out of 9 employees at one time.
Damn!
Crazy, I know, but it's true. So what I want to talk about in today's video is where you find the best employees, how to train them, and the mistakes that you can avoid. So think of employees as building a family. As the business gets bigger, your business is only as good as your team, or AK your family, right? If you had kids, daughters, wife, etc. And so one of the first things that you're gonna wanna do is hire in the order of what takes the most time for you per day. So as you scale the company, you really wanna start with what takes most of the time. It'd be the same thing if you're running a household. Like, what takes the most time? You could offload those chores to, your daughter, or your son, or something like that. Now, the benefit for me, and what I would say first, is try to find people you trust to work in your business. Luckily for me, the 2 first hires I had were my brothers. One became a coach, which was great because fulfillment takes a ton of time. I trusted him. And then the second one was in sales. And so before you ever go out and start looking on Indeed and Glassdoor and ZipRecruiter and all these other sites, make sure you start with someone you can trust, right? Now, if you don't have a family member, the next best thing is someone who knows someone else. So before I ever go on job sites, I think it's a great idea to go on Facebook and post there, or your email list, or even acquaintances, because one of the biggest things people don't realize when they're hiring is that it's all about trust, right? And getting to know the person. You can pretty much on paper say that most people can do a certain job, but what you're looking for is work ethic, like honesty, integrity, drive, like skills, those types of things. And that can take a lot of time to go through in an interview process. So anytime you can shortcut that with people think of it as, dating. Like, when you went out to date, you didn't just want to immediately swipe on Tinder. If you have a friend who has another mutual friend, there's a lot of trust there that the date they're setting up is gonna be good. It's the same thing in business. So that's gonna be tip number 1, is try to start with people you trust or have some type of relationship with, whether that's a friend, a family member, a sibling, etc. And then 2, make sure that they do the positions that take the most time. It makes no sense to hire something that takes you 10 minutes a day when there's another position that takes 6 hours. So first 2 positions I had was fulfillment and sales, and luckily it was my brothers, which really helped build a great foundation. Now, the second thing I started hiring after that was a messenger. And so think of a messenger as someone who does lead generation, messaging. And what I actually did for this is I hired what you could call a headhunter. Now, this was a personal friend of mine, but they actually have a recruiting company where they will go and find different people to put in the business. Now, what she did for me is she went out on Indeed and she found a couple people. Now, here was a big mistake I made. And you could think of this the same way in your own life, is the first person she brought in already had experience in the position, right? So lead generation. And so they immediately became manager. Never, ever, ever do that. That's like essentially dating a girl, making her your wife before you actually date her. You don't just automatically promote someone to being your wife. They got to date you for a bit and show they're normal and that they're going to be a good fit for the process. So that was a big mistake there. And what ended up happening was the manager was underperforming the second person, and we actually flip-flopped roles, and that second person has actually been with my company for 4 years. So whenever you bring someone in, make sure that they earn their position. Now, as companies get bigger, if you're talking about a 9-figure company, that could change, but I think for 7- and 8-figure companies, the best thing is to breed people up through the ranks, because you're not really a big company. Some people will look at my company and say, hey, you're pretty big. You do 15+ million a year, but it's really not big in comparison to a 9-figure company who's doing at least 100 mil a year. So make sure when you do that, same thing as dating. I like to do kind of like dating analogies. Do the test run first before you promote, because what ends up happening is you waste a lot of time. It's like getting a divorce, right? Like, people talk about learning experiences, but if you marry someone and you divorce after 7 years, it's kind of a waste of time per se. Instead, if you date them first and then you figure out before you get married, they're not a good fit. Same thing here. So that was the second thing I hired for, and that was a lesson I learned. Now, after that, what I started doing is I had to start building up the lead generation team, because these are the individuals on my team who are messaging or prospecting to try to bring leads from my social media accounts into the business. Now, here was the next mistake. I went for quantity over quality. So again, using the dating relationship example, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in college, you'd always have the guys who brag about the girls they're dating, right? And they said they like, oh, I've hooked up with like 7 girls, and they start showing you pictures and they're like 3s and 4s, right? Versus the guy who has, maybe a couple girls he's dated and they're 10s. So this is the same thing in business. Don't try to cut corners saving money. So what I did is I started going out and I hired a bunch of foreign contractors. Now, I'm not saying if you don't live in the US of A, you shouldn't be hired. What I'm saying is usually countries that the first language was not English. And so what happened is I was paying very little money, but their production was very poor. And so what ended up happening is that I had to start firing 8 out of 9 of these individuals.
Please leave this office. We're done with this interview.
Do we get any sort of souvenir?
Get out of my office!
Now I do have one of my best workers. She actually lives in Honduras, but she has a great control of the English language, and I think that's why she does so well. These other individuals were from the Philippines and stuff like that, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they just didn't have control of the language. And so what I learned early on was paying a little bit more money to get a higher level quality person in the long run is much better than going for quantity, right? Like the Tinder swipes, same exact thing. And the reason for that is if someone comes in the business but then leaves and that door is constantly revolving, it really hurts your business. What you're looking for is to bring someone in and they stay for a long time. So that was another lesson I learned along the journey, was building up that lead generation team and not going for quality over quantity. Now, something to hit on, most of these individuals that I find, if they're not from my email list or my free Facebook group or people I know, that's my first option. Most of the time, we would find these on 2 sites, Indeed or ZipRecruiter. Now, I don't get any money from them, I'm not affiliated. Those have just been the 2 main sites that we've usually used. We also had another site that you could try called FlexJobs, but overall, I would really try to maybe stick with Indeed first, and then if that doesn't work, you could go to ZipRecruiter or something like that. Now, at this point, all I really have left to add in is a media buyer for my social media ads, a COO to run the company per se, and then building the sales team. So again, I wish I could change the story up on you, but it goes back to what I said at the beginning, no like and trust factor. And so a lot of my sales team has been built from people that my brother Gentry knows, who works on the sales team with me and has closed millions and millions of dollars. And then the COO position was actually filled again by a referral from one of my old mentors, David Fry. And so again, one of the biggest things I can try to relay to you is it's the same thing with dating or trusting other people in your network. When it comes to a referral or someone who knows that person, they almost always work out because that person has a very good idea of their work ethic, their skills, what they've done, their attitude, things of that nature, which a lot of time takes tons of time in applications, right? Now, let's say this doesn't work, right? And you're the guy and you're like, look, my only option is I'm on vacation, I have to swipe on Tinder for these dates, same way as you have to build your company. Then the next best way to do it is to try to have some type of application with questions so that when you post on the site, you're not spending all these times hopping on initial interviews. That was a huge mistake I made. I was actually hopping on calls every single time someone said they were interested and doing 10 to 15 minute interviews and wasting my whole day. So what really helped was when I made an application that had certain requirements and questions, will you be full-time? Can you stay for a year? What type of skills do you have? What are you looking for? How old are you? And stuff like that. It really helped so that I would get, let's say 50 applications, I'd only have 3 interviews and I'd hire 1. That really changed the game for me in my business. And it may seem like common sense to you, but it's the same thing as again, it goes back to dating. I didn't always date the right way. I would go on dates with every single girl. And now that I'm older, I'll start trying to vet in advance to kind of see okay, well, what do you like? What are you doing? What are your goals? So I don't have to go waste all these times on dates to figure it out. I know I've used that analogy, but it just seems so similar in the sense of business. Okay, now, so let's say you have the hires now, and I've kind of walked you through most of my journey and how I built my team from the ground up. And it really starts from the most time-intensive things to the least time-intensive things. And then as the company grows, you start bringing in higher level individuals to run the company. Now, how do you tell they're a good fit? Once you bring them on board, the first thing we try to do is we'll run them through training.
Other weaknesses, we're slow learners and we're not particularly good listeners. That'll be a huge problem.
So we'll put them in a training portal and they will have to go through this train. And then at the end of that, we give them a test, right? So think of this as like a quiz in school, or like the SAT or something like that. And they go through this test, and by looking at that, how they perform, we're able to get a good idea if they're gonna stick around. And then we basically typically, for different positions, it depends, but we'll put them on kind of a trial period. So 30, 60 days, and we'll put them at a lower base pay, and then if they perform, we raise the base, and then we kind of know they're gonna stick around for the long term. Now, that's more entry-level positions. For salary positions or executive positions, sometimes you may not do it that way because they need to know that they're switching over from another high-level job, that they have that security. But that's really the way we try to do it, especially for entry level, so that we're not wasting a bunch of time training and spending time on individuals until we know they're gonna stick and they're a good fit for our system. In the beginning, you may have to do that, but don't get caught up training every single person individually. Really do it once, record all the videos, put it in a portal, so that way when you train individuals or bring in new hires, you could speed the process up but not have to spend all the time doing it. Same exact thing when we go back to the dating analogies I've been making through this video. If you had a way to vet prospects, right, where you were going on dates or girls on Tinder and you had someone who could actually do initial interviews, or like you had like a video series or something funny like that, it could weed out a lot of the girls so that you're only spending time with the best prospects that are quote unquote gonna stick around and are wifey material. All right guys, so hope that makes sense. I wish you the best of luck in your Tinder as well as your team building opportunities. I hope it goes well for you. Let me know if you have any comments or questions down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.